Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture and a literary review today. One of the most powerful novels ever written. When I first read it, when I was in elementary school, Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster from 1978. A Star Wars novel. The first, really, not like a movie adaptation novel. And a pretty good little story. The opening quote of the book: "How beautiful was the universe," Luke thought. "How beautifully flowing, glorious, and aglow like the robe of a queen, ice-black clean in its emptiness and solitude, so unlike the motley collage of spinning dust motes men called their worlds, where the human bacteria throve and multiplied and slaughtered one another, all so that one might say he stood a little higher than his fellows." Yes, boys and girls, it's 1970 science fiction, and although Star Wars had brought the idea of fun back into the genre, well, the bleak 1970s attitude was not going away entirely just yet. Like I said, Splinter of the Mind's Eye is the first non-movie adaptation novel written in the Star Wars universe, written by Alan Dean Foster, and really right after the film, Star Wars, that had launched the phenomenon, was released. It was written as a contingency sequel while Star Wars was still filming in case the movie flopped. Now, Foster also ghostwrote the Star Wars novelization. George Lucas gave Foster story notes, and it was deliberately structured for ready adaptation into a lower budget sci-fi film. The planet they visit is foggy, allowing set reuse. There was no giant space battle, although there are some pretty good action set pieces in the novel. No Han Solo because Harrison Ford wasn't locked in yet for doing any sequels, etc. The basic plot has Luke and Leia on their way to a rebel conference on Serkarpus when they lose control of their spaceships, an X-Wing and a Y-Wing, and crash on a swampy moon, Mimban. Now here they get pulled into the search for a powerful crystal that seems to increase the power of Force users. I think the book captures the spirit of the original movie pretty well, while also expanding the universe in kind of fun but grounded ways. And most importantly, I think it really would have translated into a film very well, and I think it probably still could to this day. Well, Luke and Leia in the book feel, like I said, authentic to what they were in the Star Wars film, but with a little added depth. We still at this point have the romance angle, since the whole brother-sister and an I'm your father stuff didn't yet exist. Note this particular passage. Then he happened to glance down at his companion's face. It was not the face of a princess and a senator, or of a leader of the rebel alliance, but instead that of a chilled child. Moistly parted in her sleep, her lips seemed to beckon to him. He leaned closer, seeking refuge from the damp green and brown of the swamp. In that hypnotic redness, he hesitated, pulled back. She was an aristocrat and a rebel leader. For all he'd accomplished above Yavin, he was still only a pilot, and before that, a farmer's nephew. Peasant and princess, he mused disgustedly. So we got that romance thing going, and that subplot is advanced by this book. Luke's feelings of inadequacy due to his position of life, or in life, Princess Leia's own, dedication to the rebellion and stuff, but you see them get kind of close here and there. We also get, I think, this passage, which, again, kind of builds on Leia's character. It's when she's confronted with the possibility of capture by an Imperial governor. An Imperial governor? Leia had slumped, was backing away and breathing unevenly, both hands going to her face. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Grandma was studying her intently. Yes, why should that bother you so? He glanced sharply at Luke. What's going on here? Ignoring him, Luke moved to comfort the princess. Take it easy, Leia. It may not mean anything. Imperial governors don't take an interest in common thieves, Luke, she whispered tightly. Something was clutching at her throat. I'll be interrogated again. Like that time. She broke away, threw herself up against the back wall of the cell. So it's a great callback to the infamous torture scene in Star Wars and the way it affected her. And this is brought up a couple of times in the book, but never really in the sequel films. And so that's why I say they do a pretty good job character building here, because it does work off of things that occurred in the first film and it explores them a little more fully. Luke also gets some nice moments, including a confrontation, and I don't feel as though this is a spoiler because, well, look at the cover, a confrontation with Darth Vader. "I'm going to kill you, Darth Vader." That humorless laugh again. "What a high opinion you hold of yourself, Skywalker." I'm Ben Kenobi," Luke whispered in an odd way. For just a moment, Vader seemed shaken. "Ben Kenobi's dead. I killed him myself. You are simple Luke Skywalker, an ex-farm boy from Tatooine. You are no master of the Force, and the equal of Ben Kenobi you will never be." So we get a little bit of nice development of the whole Luke Kenobi relationship, with him kind of maybe at one point kind of adopting his name, but also shows some of the key elements of the original trilogy were, as I mentioned before, not yet invented. Darth Vader was not intended to be Luke's father, or Leia's father for that matter, so the fact that he knows his last name is Skywalker doesn't ring any bells for him. So we get, this nice work from the early days of Star Wars, where so much was left to explore in that universe. You get something similar from the Marvel Comics series about Star Wars. It was a lot of interesting new stuff. The book also has some nice world building, or galaxy far, far away building, as the case may be. Foster does a nice job with Mimban, the swamp world, before we got Dagobah, and there are elements in this book that I think found their way into other films in the trilogy. It also covers the natives of the planet, folks from out of town, like the Yuzum, that Luke and Leia meet in prison. This is the passage that sort of introduces them. He continued walking slowly toward the waiting figure. It stood little taller than he did, but was built much more massively. Its hair-covered arms reached to the cell floor, the hands dragging on the stone. A long snout protruded from the center of the face, obscuring any mouth. Two huge black eyes stared expectantly at him. Well, I took a stab at letting Grok try to visualize what the Yuzum looked like, or what it might have looked like if this had been turned into a movie back then. Not too bad. The proboscis might be a little bit too long, but maybe it gives you a little idea of what this thing might have looked like had it actually become a film, maybe 79 or 1980. We also get in this book the mysterious Kyber crystal, which drives much of the action in the plot. Here's how it's described. What they saw was a splinter of something that looked like red glass and glowed softly. The color was deeper, richer than red corundum. It had vitreous luster resembling crystallized honey. Now, the Kyber crystal was based on an early Kyber, K-I-B-E-R, slightly different spelling, a Kyber crystal idea from Lucas's original script drafts for Star Wars. And it has some ability to maybe increase the power of a Force user, and so there's a desire to get a hold of it, and maybe also a desire to keep it out of the hands of the Empire. In addition to the appearance of the Dark Lord of the Sith in this book, we get an excellent villain in the form of Captain Supervisor Grammel, in charge of the Empire's secret mining operations on Mimban. He is described thus. Grammel added no color to his surroundings. His face was eggshell pale, and the image of the Imperial officer was tarnished further when he stood to reveal a modest paunch curving gently from beneath his sternum like a frozen waterfall of suet, to crash and tumble somewhere below the waistline in a jumble of uniform. The silver and gray uniform itself was spotless and neat, however, as if in an attempt to camouflage the belly beneath. Above the tight high collar, the neck jumped out to a square jaw bordered by a drooping mustache. The line of that facial hair matched well the dour expression the Captain Supervisor wore habitually, Luke guessed. Tiny, penetrating eyes peered out from beneath brows like a granite ridge, overtopped by uneasy black and gray hair. And obviously I also let Grok try to imagine him. Not too bad. It had trouble with the uniform, but also very funny. On the first attempt, it translated the granite brows into eyebrows that were actually made of granite. Maybe I should have kept that. I don't know. Maybe it would work in a science fiction film. Well, Grammel is an excellent rendition of the evil bureaucrat, and he is relatively smart and efficient and quite scheming. I really enjoyed his particular brand of villainy and think it could have been a great part for an actor. Evil, but not mustache-twirling evil, a little cold, ambitious, arrogant, honestly not too different from Peter Cushing's Grand Moff Tarkin. Now, of course, when Vader shows up, Grammel is no longer top banana on Mimban. He's not super happy, Darth Vader, with Luke Skywalker. This is where one of his entrances, slowly Leia's mouth moved, forming a name, but no sound issued from between those perfect lips. Moving leisurely down the pile of rubble, Darth Vader addressed them in a coldly conversational tone. You know, Skywalker, I had a difficult time finding out that it was you who shot up my TIE fighter above the Death Star station. Rebellion spies are hard and expensive to come by. I also found out it was you who released the torpedo that destroyed the station. You have a great deal to atone for to me. I've waited a long time. Now remember, at this point, Vader's just this big bad enforcer for the Emperor. They haven't yet woven the much deeper story between Vader and Luke, but I think it works really well. And even with all of that added stuff that we get later, I think if you tried to make a movie version of this today, that this would still work. I don't think it would really be a problem. I don't think there's anything in this book that is so at odds with the original trilogy that it would be a really big problem. Now, a few elements, like I said, of this book, I think might have found their way into The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. One in particular with Vader that I won't go into because it's a great bit from a great scene towards the end of the book. But there's also this giant worm-like creature. You got the foggy swamp planet, primitives fighting Imperial troops. A lot of stuff that was probably buzzing in Lucas's head that would later end up in the other films. With these sort of books, there's the basic entertainment factor of the story itself. And this is a fun story with many great moments. But also, as I've mentioned, you get to see what might have been and seeing authors pursue avenues that might later have been blocked, by canon, and maybe not in the trilogy, but from other later things. But it was a wide open universe. And there was a lot to still be created for Star Wars. So there's a lot of youthful sort of energy in this book. Splinter of the Mind's Eye was the first novel I ever read as a kid. It was a paperback sitting on the shelf in my 5th grade classroom. We were supposed to read something, and though I was a good reader and liked to read, I really hated being forced to read. And then I saw that image of Darth Vader on the cover, and my young mind was blown. Like, that's Star Wars. There's like a Star Wars book? Oh my God. Now, picking it up again as an adult was fun. It's a rollicking good adventure, and there are some really great moments in it for both Luke, maybe especially for Leia. Would have made a fantastic low to mid-budget sequel back in the day, and again, I think it still could today. You'd have to recast the characters, of course, and make allowances for later canon in the films to an extent. But I think if you read it, you'll see that you get some really great action, some great visual effects, a fantastic bit of lightsabering at the end of the film, character development for Luke and Leia, just some really great stuff. Live action cartoon, I think, could also be a smart way to go. If Disney wanted to pursue that, kind of get back on track with the franchise, which of course means there's no way that will ever happen. And there were some royalty disputes between Foster and Disney that would not help the project become reality either. Splinter of the Mind's Eye is a quick read and a fun book that I think every Star Wars fan, and really fans of sci-fi in general, should check out. I think they would enjoy. Again, it's more space opera than it is anything else. It's not getting deep and philosophical about things, but just a good sci-fi adventure. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Should they adapt this someday? Would you trust them to adapt this someday? Love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this little review of, let's take old Grammel down and get that up there. There we go. If you enjoyed this little review of Splinter of the Mind's Eye, please give it a like, maybe subscribe, maybe share with a friend. That'd be very cool. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. And I will see you hopefully again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.